January 23rd, 1909, 5:47 in the morning, Nantucket Sound off the coast of Massachusetts. The RMS Republic of the White Star Line is steaming through fog so thick the lookouts can barely see the bow. 1,500 passengers and crew are aboard. Most are still asleep. At 5:47 a.m., lookouts see something emerging from the fog, a ship, dead ahead, too close. The SS Florida, an Italian liner, materializes out of the fog like a ghost. Florida's bow strikes Republic on the port side with tremendous force. The impact tears a 40-foot gash in Republic's hull. Water pours in. 3 people on each ship die instantly. What happens next will shape how White Star Line thinks about safety for the next 3 years. It will influence the design of Olympic and Titanic, and it will teach exactly the wrong lesson. I'm Keith Conrad, and this is Sidequests. In this episode, the construction of the Titanic, the workers who died building her, the rivets that failed, the design flaw no one saw, and how the sinking of RMS Republic taught the wrong lesson about safety. Jack Binns, the ship's 26-year-old wireless operator, immediately begins tapping out the distress call. CQD, 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 Republic, CQD. Every wireless operator within range knew what it meant, and they responded. The Baltic, the Furnesia. Ships across the western Atlantic heard Binns' call and changed course. Republic stayed afloat for 39 hours. Think about that. A ship with a 40-foot gash, flooding, crippled, and she stayed afloat for more than a day and a half. The watertight compartments worked. The design worked. The ship gave her passengers time, and the wireless brought help. Over the next day and a half, in remarkably calm and organized fashion, Republic's passengers and crew were transferred to rescue ships. Lifeboats ferried them back and forth. Trip after trip, orderly, professional. On January 24th, nearly 39 hours after the collision, Republic finally slipped beneath the waves. The death toll, 6 people, 3 from each ship killed in the initial collision, everyone else saved. 1,500 lives rescued because the ship stayed afloat long enough and because wireless brought help in time. The newspapers called it the miracle of wireless. White Star Line looked at what happened to Republic and concluded the system works. Watertight compartments keep a damaged ship afloat. Wireless brings help. There's time to evacuate. There are always other ships nearby. Passengers can be transferred to rescue vessels using the ship's lifeboats. Therefore, you don't need enough lifeboats to hold everyone at once. You just need enough lifeboats to ferry passengers from the damaged ship to the rescue ships. This logic seemed airtight. It was based on real experience. Republic had proven it. So when Olympic and Titanic were designed, the lifeboat calculations were based on this principle. Enough boats for orderly transfer, not enough boats for total evacuation. 20 boats, capacity for 1,178 people. On ships certified to carry 3,500 passengers and crew, this met Board of Trade regulations written in 1894 that calculated lifeboat requirements based on ship tonnage, not passenger capacity. White Star exceeded the requirements. They installed 20 boats instead of 16. They felt this was generous, responsible, safe. But the Republic had been in fog in one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world, just off the American coast, surrounded by other vessels. The Baltic arrived in 10 hours. Republic had been damaged but remained stable, settling slowly, giving almost 2 full days to evacuate. Republic had been in relatively calm seas and warm weather. All of these factors made the Republic rescue possible, and not one of them would apply to the Titanic. In December 1908, just weeks before the Republic disaster, the keel of Olympic was laid in Belfast. 3 months later, in March 1909, 2 months after Republic proved the system worked, construction began on Titanic. The ships would be the largest ever built, the safest ever built, with watertight compartments and wireless and all the lessons of the Republic incorporated into their design, and lifeboats for 1,100 people. Because there was no need for more, the Republic had proven it. Queen's Island, Belfast. A man-made peninsula jutting into the River Lagan, now home to the largest shipbuilding operation in the world. Harland and Wolff employed 15,000 men. In a city of 350,000, that meant 1 in 23 people in Belfast worked for the yard, And in 1909, Harland and Wolff was attempting something unprecedented, building two ships simultaneously, each larger than anything ever built before. The gantry they constructed was 840 feet long, 240 feet wide, 228 feet high, a steel framework that towered over the Belfast skyline, visible for miles. Inside the gantry, on two massive slipways, the sisters began to take shape. Olympic's keel was laid December 16, 1908. Titanic's keel was laid March 31st, 1909. Hull number 400 and hull number 401. The largest moving objects ever created by human hands built side by side. Building a ship starts with the keel, the spine, the foundation. From there, the skeleton rises. Frames, beams, ribs of steel. Then comes the plating, massive sheets of steel fitted into place and secured. 26,000 tons of steel would go into Titanic's hull. 3 million rivets would hold it together. 3 million. Most heated red hot, positioned and hammered into place by hand, by teams working in brutal conditions, in deafening noise for over 50 hours a week. Riveting gangs worked in crews of 4. The heater boy, usually a teenager, heated rivets until they glowed cherry red. The catcher caught the rivet when tossed. The holder-up braced it, while the riveter attacked it with a hammer that sounded like a machine gun. The noise was indescribable. Men went partially deaf. Inside the hull, the sound echoed until it felt like being inside a bell while it was being struck. The heat was intense. In summer, temperatures inside the hull could reach 100 degrees. In winter, you had roasting heat from the braziers and freezing cold from outside competing within feet of each other. And the danger was constant. And yet there was pride. When workers were asked what they didn't say, "I'm a riveter." They said, "I'm building the Titanic." But here's what they didn't know. Some of the rivets they were driving, particularly in the bow where the ship would strike the iceberg, were made of iron, not steel. Iron rivets were cheaper, easier to shape and hammer. They met specifications, but they were also weaker than steel rivets, more brittle, more likely to fail under stress. This wasn't negligence, it was standard practice. Iron rivets had been used for decades. They worked fine. And in 1909, no one could imagine a scenario where the difference between iron and steel rivets would matter. But on April 14, 1912, when the iceberg struck, some of those rivets would pop like buttons. The plates they held would separate, water would pour through the gaps. Steel rivets might have limited the damage to 4 compartments instead of 6, might have saved the ship. The hull was divided by 15 transverse bulkheads into 16 watertight compartments. Watertight doors, electrically operated from the bridge, could seal each compartment off if water entered. This was the ship's safety system. This was what made her practically unsinkable. The ship could float with any 2 compartments flooded. Even if the first 4 compartments were breached by a head-on collision, the ship would remain afloat. But there was a crucial design decision, made early and never questioned. The bulkheads only extended to E-deck, some only to D-deck. Why? Because extending them all the way to the top deck would create walls cutting through first-class areas. The grand staircase couldn't span multiple decks if bulkheads blocked it. The large public rooms would be subdivided. So this bulkhead stopped at E-deck. They were tall, rising 3 or 4 decks above the waterline, but they didn't go all the way up. The design had margins. It was safe. What no one foresaw was damage spanning 6 compartments. Water would spill over the top of the forward bulkheads and pour into the next compartment, and then the next, and then the next. Like ice cube trays tilting, water flowing from one to another in sequence unstoppable. But that scenario seemed absurd. What could damage 6 compartments? A collision hits in one place, maybe 2. The truth was the design was sound, for the disaster everyone could imagine. A head-on collision, a grounding, a fire. What she couldn't survive was the disaster no one imagined. A glancing blow along 300 feet of hull, opening small gaps across 6 compartments. But in 1909, as the hull took shape in Belfast, that particular disaster was unimaginable. October 20th, 1910, Olympic launch day. 100,000 people lined the shores of Belfast to watch. At 11 a.m., the hydraulic triggers were pulled. Olympic began to move, 62 seconds from stationary to afloat. And beside the empty slipway, Titanic's skeleton continued to rise. May 31st, 1911 was Titanic's turn. Another 100,000 spectators, the largest ship in the world, ready to enter the water. No christening. White Star didn't christen their ships. Thomas Ismay had once said, "Waste of good champagne." At 11 a.m., the triggers were pulled, 62 seconds, stationary to afloat. Precision engineering. She was moved to the Thompson Graving Dock, where she would spend the next 10 months being transformed from an empty shell into a functioning ship. Titanic, as she sat at berth 44 in Southampton on April 10, 1912, was the largest moving object human beings had ever created. 882 feet long, 92 feet wide, 175 feet tall from keel to funnel tops, 46,000 tons, and the lifeboats, 14 standard wooden lifeboats, each certified for 65 people, 2 smaller emergency cutters, 40 people each, 4 Engelhart collapsibles, 47 people each, total capacity 1,178 people. Passenger capacity 2,435 plus 900 crew, 3,300 potential occupants, lifeboats for 1,178. The arithmetic was simple and brutal. If the ship sank, if the impossible happened, 2,000 people would have no place in a lifeboat. But no one thought about this. The lifeboats weren't for evacuation. They were for transfer to rescue ships. The Republic had proven it. The original design called for 48 lifeboats. The davits, the cranes that held the boats, were designed to handle that many. But 48 boats cluttered the boat deck. They blocked views from the first-class promenade. They made the ship look unsafe, so the boats were reduced. From 48 to 16, then 4 collapsibles were added as a compromise, 20 boats total. The reasons were multiple: cost, deck space, aesthetics. First-class passengers complained that boats blocked their view, and most importantly, confidence. The ship was unsinkable. Modern ships didn't just sink, so why waste money and space on lifeboats that would never be used? For comparison, Cunard's Lusitania, similar in size, carried 48 lifeboats with capacity for 2,600 people. White Star learned the opposite lesson from Republic. Wireless saves everyone. Lifeboats are just for transfer. 1,500 people would die because of that lesson. And there was one more thing, a small thing, almost trivial. David Blair, second officer, was bumped off the ship at the last minute when officers were reshuffled. In his haste to leave, he took something with him, the key to the locker where the lookout's binoculars were stored. So on the night Titanic struck the iceberg, the lookouts in the crow's nest had no binoculars. They relied on their eyes alone. Would binoculars have helped? Would they have spotted the iceberg sooner? We'll never know. But the margin between disaster and survival was 37 seconds from sighting to impact. Anything might have made the difference. On April 10th, 1912, none of these flaws were visible. The ship was magnificent. The ship was ready. 1,316 passengers booked passage, plus 885 crew, 2,201 souls. The weather forecast was clear and calm, perfect for a maiden voyage. April was also ice season. Ships regularly reported icebergs in the shipping lanes, but this was routine. Ice was expected. A known hazard, a manageable risk. White Star was confident. Captain Smith was confident. Thomas Andrews was confident. The largest ship in the world was ready for her maiden voyage. Southampton to Cherbourg to Queenstown to New York. The ship that couldn't sink. The ship that represented everything the Edwardian age believed about human progress conquering nature. 2,200 people were about to board her, but on the morning of April 10th, as stewards made final preparations and passengers gathered at the dock with their luggage and tickets and expectations, on that morning there was only anticipation, excitement, pride. The world was watching. The maiden voyage of the Titanic was about to begin, and in 4 days the world would wake up. For premium subscribers, we go deeper. The workers who built her, Thomas Andrews and his meticulous notebook, the engineering revolution hidden below decks, and the 3 sister ships whose fates could not have been more different. Visit newsidequest.com to hear the full episode. Next time, Titanic goes through her sea trials and the crew learns the ropes on the way to Southampton. Passengers ranging from the richest people in the world to the most humble immigrants looking for a new life converge on the largest ship in the world, plus the near collision with the New York that almost ended the voyage before it began. The maiden voyage begins.